Ready one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. We've got a cute, noisy little girl playing on the slide beside me, so let's see how much of a auditory acoustic interference that's gonna be. Come on, start screaming again, let me test. So over my voice, how is it? Here she goes. Okay, you go down the slide. Okay, yay. Okay, hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Reads. This might be one of the last weekends I can film outdoors because it's getting colder, and by the time it's warmed up enough for me to be comfortable going outside to film, Tokyo's a noisy place. But I've got one exuberant little girl playing on the slide, but I'll just stop talking when she starts. Maybe it'll work. I have had an absolutely incredible reading week this week. Shout out to Steve Donahue. I have no bails this week, and that was before I watched your videos. Steve did a book parasite tag on my Friday Reads from last week, in which he gave a really wonderful, thoughtful, impersonal, in other words, he was not attacking me for once, defense of not bailing. I disagreed with many of his points, but who cares? It was absolutely fabulous. Please go watch it. Of course, anybody who watches me watches him, but if you're like one or two people who just new to BookTube, must go and check out that video. I'll put a link in the show notes. So all of my dopamine, my bursts of dopamine-ish joy this week, Steve, have been because I have been reading and not bailing. I'm sure something will change along those lines by next week. Okay, there she goes. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. So yes, what a marvelous reading week. I am feeling a little swamped. I have ever so slightly overcommitted myself in the buddy reading department just because I wanted to do so much stuff. But I don't need to sleep, right? Take another page from Steve Donahue's life. So I have finished 4 books, so let me start with those. Like I say, there won't be any bails, and I've started about 17, or is it 1700 books this week. So the first one is a novella that I both started and finished this week, and I just kind of started it at random because I just had a yen for some more Inoue Yasushi. I read and loved his The Hunting Gun a couple of years ago. It's one of my favorite Japanese novels, one of my favorite novellas. I've talked about it many times. And I read Bullfight, and I didn't like Bullfight nearly as much, but I still liked it. And it read like a debut novel. But then I go and find out, and I'm going to double check it one more time because I can hardly believe that Hunting Gun was his debut, and Bullfight came out the next year, let's check this. Okay, so yeah, they both were published in 1949, but The Hunting Gun, Japanese title, Ryoju, was 1949, but so was the novella that I read this week, Bullfight, or Togyu, also 1949, but it was published second. It reads to me very much like a debut, but they were both published. And apparently, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, it was Bullfight that established his reputation, and I thought it wasn't nearly as good, but I enjoyed it. So Togyu is the name for Japanese bullfighting. It's called sumo bullfighting. Japanese pronounce sumo, smo. So it's like sumo wrestling with bulls. There's the bulls are not meant to be hurt, and they are not killed. It's just a pushing and pulling in the sumo ring. And this is a novella set right after the end of World War II in Osaka, which is a newly established newspaper. This decides to bring Japanese bullfighting to Osaka because it was not known in that part of Japan. It was very localized. It started in Okinawa apparently, but other parts of Japan, but kind of the boonies of Japan, and they decided to bring it as a way of making some money for the newspaper, promoting the newspaper, but also giving, in that early post-war period, giving Osakans, the Japanese people, something to get excited about. And so as I was reading it, I was reminded of the wonderful history of post-war Japan called Embracing Defeat by John Dower. It's the first book of Japanese history I ever read. I read it about a dozen years ago, and I was really casting my mind back to that book as I read this little novella. Very enjoyable. I felt the female characters were very poorly drawn, and there was a little bit of a love story in it that didn't need to be there or didn't work, but the larger story about all of the complications of bringing a bullfight to Osaka and all of the shenanigans and not quite Yakuza, but the kind of underworld, the underworld and the sleaziness of the business deals. It was pretty interesting. 4 stars. The next book I finished, I'm delighted to tell you that I've finished, and I am going to be doing a full review. I started this during the Women in Translation readathon, The One Who Did Not Ask by Alta Fatima, translated from Urdu by Rukhsana Ahmad. So I read this over about 2.5 months. It felt longer, actually. It was not a book that I could read a lot at one time, and my reading of the last half of the novel did suffer because I was only dipping into it a few times a week, a chapter here and a chapter there. So I am going to reread it, maybe in about 5 years, and I'm going to read it the way a book should be read, which is not necessarily exactly the way Steve Donahue thinks a book should be read, but a little bit closer to his prescription, his way of reading than the way that I read this. But I still got so much out of it. I loved it in a 5-star way. Probably one of my top reads of this year. And as I'm going to try to explain or try to talk about it in my this is a park off the main road. The roads are so narrow, it should be the quietest part of central Tokyo, but there's still trucks and motorcycles and Anyway, I need to film earlier in the morning when it's quieter. As I'm going to try to talk about in my review, it was the inscrutability of much of this in its language, its nicknaming, the confusing references that I couldn't find online that added to my love for this novel. So I tackled it. My reading of it was a joyful failure, and I can't wait to read it again. But I'll give it about 5 years, and then I'm going to really focus in on it, and I'll talk about it in my review. But what a wonderful reading experience. Alta Fatima is still alive. She's about 95, 96. I had a subscriber, I haven't heard from him for a while, but he commented when I first started reading this that he was Urdu. He was Pakistani, I guess, maybe. And he'd never heard of this book or the author, but it's classic, apparently. But not in print anymore, so I tend to really geek out on out-of-print books that are hard to find when I like them, and this is one that you'll be hearing me talk about for the rest of my booktube life. I also finished the audiobook of the Edwidge Danticat nonfiction book, The Art of Death, Writing the Final Story. And this was kind of a combination memoir and literary criticism, and it was not successful. The main reason it was not successful was she should not have narrated her own audiobook. She had a really monotone voice, and it was really hard to stay interested. But I also didn't think, to the degree that I'm able to divorce my reaction from her reading voice and the actual text, which I was not reading, I was just listening, I think, the prose itself wasn't that inspired either. But still, come on. The memoir part of the book about the death of her mother and her experience of the earthquake in Haiti and how it devastated so many members of her family and all that was much more successful than the literary criticism. She talked about death in the works of Murakami and Marquez and so many writers. It made me kind of make a few mental notes to self about books that I might like to read, but it was a little boring. 3 stars. Yesterday, I started and finished another novella that wasn't on my TBR. I found out somebody... Twitter gets me in trouble with book buying when I've got money burning a hole in my pocket. Somebody, I have no idea who, I don't think it was a booktuber, put a tweet up with this book, and I bought it immediately, got it the next day. Okay, now let's have an airplane. The helicopter will land over there next, and then we'll have run the transportation gamut. Oh, and now construction, of course! I received it from Amazon a couple days ago and read it yesterday. I can't shoo that crow away because it will remember me in it and give me grief for the rest of its life. There, it went away. All right. This is a novella, the title, An Untouched House by Willem Frederik Hermans, a Dutch writer. Britta Bowler commented on my review, and we've talked about it since on Voxer, that Hermans is her favorite Dutch writer. This was published in 1951, early post-war period, and it's about World War II. So I know a lot of youngins don't like reading World War II fiction. I don't have that. Even though I'm really young, I don't have that prejudice. But this was really good. 4 stars. I didn't love it because it didn't... I need to feel emotions, not just horror or curiosity. I need to feel some sort of emotional connection with the characters, which I didn't here. But it was so good. If you like war fiction, and if you like, it's been compared to Joseph Heller's Catch-22, which I couldn't finish, by the way, but after reading this, I thought, maybe I was probably reading it the wrong way. So that would be by Steve's Taxonomy. That would be that was a DNF, not a bail, because I do plan to go back to Catch-22. I read it in the middle of my 4-year reading slump, and that was a bad book to try to get out of a reading slump with. But anyway, this is about a partisan guy. We don't even really know where the story's happening. It's kind of in an area of Europe that keeps going back and forth between the Allied control and German control. And it's about a soldier. He's a partisan that... I guess he's Dutch. He's a Dutch partisan. But yeah, he is. That's right. He is got the most existential way of being in the world, being in the war, being under fire, and seeking refuge from the war for a few days in this house. Not for a few days, for several months. It's wonderful. It's absurdist. It's obscenely violent. And one of the best pieces of fiction I've read about World War II in years. Really good. So that's what I've read. I have started a whole swack of new stuff. I starting from scratch. A different kind of writer's manual by Rita Mae Brown. This is a buddy read with Chris from the podcast Book Cougars. And I'm not really enjoying it. Not nearly as much as I did when I read it 30 years ago or whenever. It's dated, and the one chapter about Anglo-Saxon and Latinate English is still it's really the only thing that I really wanted to read. I'll be finished it tomorrow, but yeah, a little disappointing on a reread. Much more exciting is this Swedish novel, and this is part of Britta's Nobel Women Read-Along series, which starts this month. The Saga of Gösta Berling by Selma Lagerlöf. I got it from Amazon, and look how it arrived. Maybe this is from me turning the pages, but this was scuffed. Sometimes that happens with Amazon, and I should have sent it back, but I'm so eager to start reading it that I just, whatever. It pisses me off, though, when that happens. Anyway, who cares about that? Because I love this novel. I'm only on page 30. I'm not going to be even close to finishing it by the time Britta puts up her video. I think the 25th of this month, because it's 400 pages. But it sucked me in from page 1. The translation by the one she recommended is Paul Norlin. And this is the Penguin Classics edition. The translation is wonderful, and I really sunk into this. So I gotta keep going with it. If I don't finish it until December, I don't finish it till December, but I love it. Based on the first 30 pages. And I started this Canadian novel from Newfoundland, We'll All Be Burnt in Our Beds Some Night, by Joel Thomas Hines, and I had misgivings going in, and by the end of the first chapter, I had such a strong reaction against the male character. He's a young, violent criminal, and it's told in first person in that diction, and he is such an awful person, and it's not that I wanted to bail, but I just thought, I don't think this is for me, and I stuck with it. I'm doing it with a buddy read with the 5 Lovely Ladies. I mentioned it in Friday Reads last week, and I stuck with it, and I'm really glad I did, because, you know, like any good work of literature should do, this takes you beneath the surface of this young man's life, and you start to care about him and understand him more, and it's really well done. I am getting a little tired as I come to I got 2 more chapters to read, and I think I'm going to take a break from it tomorrow. I need a break from this book, but I would fault it that there's too many really disgusting scenes. There was a memorable scene about a diarrhea attack in a hotel jacuzzi that I won't soon forget, and I kind of like that. Freud, do with that what you will. But there was just too many of them, and he's kind of showing off, I feel, but still, it's really good. It's really good. This is one that I kind of forgot to put on my TBR, and I've started it this week on audio yesterday. It is a work of history, of popular social history, How to Behave Badly in Renaissance Britain by Ruth Goodman, and she narrates the audiobook on what a marvelous accent. This is a buddy read with Ange from Beyond the Pages. It is a history of exactly what the title says, of how people acted out, misbehaved, behaved rudely, not necessarily criminal behavior, but socially unacceptable behavior in Renaissance Britain. It is fascinating. So I'm halfway through chapter 1, and it's about swearing and cussing and the kinds of civil suits that people would sue each other for insults. And so she's examined the court records, and the Renaissance England version of eat shit was turd in your teeth. Turd in your teeth. I was walking down the street yesterday, my headphones on, listening to that, and I almost peed my pants. Ange has read several others by her, and I might want to too. So, Nonfiction November is going very well, as is Novellas in November. And lastly, yesterday I started my very first piece of fiction by Joyce Cora Oates. This is her novella Blackwater, and this is a buddy read with Britta Bowler. And Eric said he was nervous because he and I so often disagree. And I've only read 10 chapters, but I am here to say that the writing is wonderful. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah. And this kind of a novel that's based on a recent historical event with a historical personage. It's loosely based on Chappaquiddick and Ted Kennedy. I don't like historical personages in my fiction, and it's not bothering me. I'm enjoying it so far, and I don't expect that I'm going to end up bailing or hating on it, and really enjoying discussing it with Britta. So those are the books I've started. So right now, how many books am I actively reading? 12. Well, last week it was 13, so it's not bad. I am planning to start a bunch of other stuff in the coming week, so here is next week's TBR. Tomorrow I'm starting 2 new buddy reads. One is the nonfiction book Stone of Destiny by Ian Hamilton. This is the nonfiction account of this. I think he was one of the people who was involved, Scottish nationalist, university student, him and a bunch of his buddies. I don't know how organized they were, but they stole some relic, some crown or something. I don't know the details, but they stole something that was of deep cultural importance to the Scots, that when Scotland was subsumed into the British Empire, into the United Kingdom, the English took it and put it in Westminster Abbey. And so in about 1950, these young Scots stole it back and took it back to Scotland and got into all kinds of trouble. So it's the true story of that. Apparently it's been made into a movie. This is a buddy read with Mel. She's already predicting a bail. So Steve, hold your fire and make your next video about her. And also, I am so excited to finally be starting this novel. This is the Irish novel Language Go Down by Aidan Higgins. And remember, I've shown it on my channel not for a few months, but it's one of the most gorgeous softcover books I have ever seen. And I am doing this as a buddy read with Christine and her BookTube channel. She doesn't post nearly enough videos because each and every one is to die for. Her channel is called Turning Pages 52. I'll put a link in the show notes. We have a lot in common. We both got married this year. She loves brandishing the Oxford comma, so do I. And I'm not sure where she lives. Australia, maybe. She'll tell you all about it on her channel, but she's wonderful. And I'm so excited to finally get to this novel, which I bought about 6 months ago. And I don't seem to be able to read a book without buddy reading it, so I'm so glad Christine and I have made this plan.
The following pronunciation is brought to you by pronouncenames.com.
Buchan. Buchan.
And late next week, I'm going to be doing another novella buddy read. This one with Ollie Bliss. And it will be of John Buchan's famous novella, 39 Steps. We're going to do it over 3 days, 3 chapters a day. Oh, one more, but it's not, I haven't been able to touch base with Kendra Winchester. I think we're going to be starting our buddy read of The Court Dancer by Kyung Suk Shin. I forgot to bring my gorgeous hardcover book, but I haven't been able to touch base with her, so I'm not sure if it's starting next week or not, but if not, it might have to be a 2019 read for me, but that one might be in progress too, so I have my reading cut out for me. What do you think? But what a happy problem. That's all I got. I think it's enough. How about you? What are you up to this weekend, reading-wise or otherwise? Thanks for watching.